I've come to a very important realization that I never understood before. I always thought peace was a destination, a place I had to reach. For example, I used to tell myself, when my bank account gets better, when my job becomes more stable, when my daily schedule gets more organized, then finally I'll be able to breathe easy. But I realized something too late, that one day never comes. Because every new stage of life you enter brings its own new model of stress with it. When you have no money, you're stressed. When you make money, you're stressed about keeping it. When you're alone, you feel one kind of pressure. When you have a family to take care of, you feel another. In other words, the game never ends. And that's when I understood. The problem isn't life itself. The problem is that I didn't know how to live with this pressure. Here's a real example from everyday life. Imagine you're stuck in traffic, let's say on the freeway during rush hour. There's no way out. Two different people in two different cars. One guy is swearing under his breath, honking every few seconds, constantly checking the clock, and getting more and more agitated the longer it takes. The other person, in the exact same situation, has put on a podcast, or is simply paying attention to their breathing, or is just sitting in silence, quietly observing everything around them. Nothing in the outside world has changed, but the experience of these two people is worlds apart. This is a very important point. We think stress comes from outside, but the truth is, most of it comes from how we react. And that reaction is directly connected to our mind. Our mind has a very dangerous habit. It either goes to the past or jumps to the future. When it goes to the past, it starts reviewing, analyzing, and blaming. When it goes to the future, it starts building scenarios, generating worries, and making negative predictions. And here's the problem. The body doesn't fully distinguish between what's real and what's imagined. So you might be sitting comfortably on your couch, but because your mind is imagining the worst-case scenario, your body reacts as if it's actually happening. Your heart starts racing, your breathing gets shallow, and your body tenses up. That's when I realized something crucial. A huge portion of the stress we experience doesn't come from reality at all. It comes from the stories our mind creates. And if you don't understand this, you spend your entire life fighting an imaginary enemy. Now the question is, what should we do? The first change I made was this. Instead of trying to control my mind, I started controlling my attention. Because controlling the mind is almost impossible. But controlling your attention is completely doable. For example, when I notice my mind drifting toward worry, instead of following it, I gently bring my attention back to something real, like my breathing. It sounds very simple, but its effect is profound. When you focus on your breath, your brain disconnects from the past and future and returns to the present moment. And in the present moment, stress is much lower. Another practice that helped me a lot was this. When stress arises, instead of asking, "Why am I like this?" I say, "Right now, I'm experiencing stress." This simple sentence creates a small distance between me and the feeling. I no longer feel like I am the stress. I'm just observing a temporary state. It's like watching it from the outside. And that distance greatly reduces the power of the stress. Another big mistake I used to make was thinking, I have to feel good first, then I can work. But now I understand it's the opposite. You have to move with the bad feeling, with the stress. For example, before starting an important task, or a new project, or even before a work call, you feel stressed. If you wait until the stress completely disappears, you'll never start. But if you begin while still feeling the stress, after a few minutes, you'll notice it has decreased. Why? Because your brain realizes there's no real danger. In fact, action reduces stress, not thinking about the stress. And this was one of the most important things I learned. In the end, I reached this conclusion. My mind is always talking. It's always generating worries, but I don't have to believe everything it says. And when I truly understood this, a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. After some time, I realized that working only on the mind isn't enough. I needed to have several different tools, each helpful in its own situation. One of the most powerful things I added was the 3-minute rule. When stress hits, instead of trying to solve it, I sit for a full 3 minutes and do absolutely nothing. No phone, no problem solving, no escaping. I just sit and let the feeling come fully and then pass. What I learned is that most waves of stress, if you don't touch them, naturally fade away after a few minutes. Another very effective technique? Brain dump, writing the mind. Whenever my mind feels cluttered, I write everything down on paper. Not neatly, not beautifully, not logically. Just whatever is in my head. Work, money, worries, unfinished tasks. This does something strange. The mind no longer has to hold on to everything, and that alone dramatically reduces the pressure. Another very practical tool, scheduled worry time. I give myself permission to worry, but only during a specific time. For example, I say, every day at this specific hour is worry time. If stress comes up during the day, I tell myself, not now. Interestingly, when that scheduled time arrives, I often don't even feel like worrying anymore. Another important insight that helped a lot, reducing mental input. A lot of stress doesn't come from life itself, but from what we let into our minds. Too much news, social media, comparison. So I started limiting them, and the impact was huge. A simple but powerful technique, cold water. When stress is high, a short exposure to cold water can reset the nervous system. Another useful one, change of environment. When stress rises, just stepping out of the current environment for a few minutes can make a big difference. The 5-5-5 rule. Ask yourself, will this matter in 5 days? In 5 months? In 5 years? Most of the time, the answer is no. Reducing decision fatigue. Every small decision takes mental energy. When decisions pile up, stress increases. So simplifying life really helps. And finally, talking to people. When you keep stress only in your head, it grows bigger. But when you express it, it becomes lighter. In the end, I realized managing stress means having a toolbox, not one magical solution. What do you think?